This is Alzheimer's Recovery Diary, episode 2. Welcome back. And today I have a limited amount of time to share with you because I don't want to record this podcast episode thingy with my mum around me. And she sleeps on the other side of this office where I am. And currently she's out doing her strength training. I have a personal training for her, and she's now doing weightlifting. I'll get into the different things that she does as part of her routine, what's worked, what we've kept, what we've dropped off. But basically, these are the times when she's not in the house and I can work on these episodes. So there is some construction going on downstairs, so it might get a little bit noisy. But I want to start with this episode just sharing about how we realized that she had some sort of cognitive issues and the journey that went on from, I'll call it the beginning, till when she was diagnosed and I decided that I wanted to work with her and see if I could help her. So I live in Colombia and my mom lives in Australia. So I don't see her that much. And even though I would go back to Australia with my family maybe once every couple of years, because of the COVID situation, there was 6 years that I didn't go back to Australia. So it was 6 years that I didn't have any contact with my mum except for on the phone. And on the phone, I didn't really notice anything except for a few kind of minor things where I was like, she's not remembering the things that I told her. I'm having to write these things down. But at that point, I didn't, here's the noise. So I didn't make a direct connection to cognitive decline at that stage. And I think that's really common. We can just make excuses for little things that happen. We can say, oh, it's just age, or, oh, that's just my mom, or she's under a lot of stress. Because she was at that time. She was looking after her partner who was dealing with breast cancer, terminal breast cancer, who has since passed away. So there's a lot of reasons and ways that you can just explain things away. So that was the first thing I noticed. Then when we went to visit her finally in Australia, I noticed that I was having to explain things over and over and over again. And then I would do that, and 5 minutes later, she'd say, but you didn't tell me. So I knew something was going along. But up until this point, no one else had noticed anything. Because when my mother was out socially or like publicly, she was fine. She, a great conversationalist, very interested in other people. And I think that was kind of a strategy, unconscious strategy for her. Just she would ask people about themselves, and the conversation would kind of revolve around them. And so no one else had noticed anything until that point. But then my wife is a doctor as well, and so she has this clinical eye that is very perceptive, and she did notice things too. So we were like, okay, something's going on. She didn't have a diagnosis of cognitive decline, but we knew something was happening. And so we created a protocol for her, everything from nutrition to exercise to reducing exposure to toxins and different things like that, and kind of gave it to her for her to apply. But over the next days and weeks with her, I realized that she was not going to be able to apply it herself. She was going to need support, and it was pretty hard to get that support. I'll go into that in other episodes. So that was kind of the first inkling that something was going on and she needed some support. But then my wife and I went back with our family to Colombia, and life went on. My sister took over looking after my mom, or being attentive to her needs, and taking her to her appointments, and she got an official diagnosis of Alzheimer's about in June of 2025. And then once it became apparent to me and to my and to my wife that something was going on, then suddenly it became apparent, like, to everyone. It was like until someone points out something and says, hey, look, can you see that thing there? And no one's noticed it until that point, and then it's just super obvious. Everyone's staring and going, oh my God, look at that, look at that, look at that. And that's, I guess, what it was. So my mum had this formal diagnosis of Alzheimer's, and then it started to be a whole focus of like, who's going to care for her? What's life going to look like? Do we need to look for a nursing home? All of that things that kind of come up when you go to a doctor and the doctor says you have this terminal illness, this thing that is going to just get worse and worse and worse and worse until you die, which is basically the story of Alzheimer's for most of the medical community and most of the people who are dealing with it. And actually, that's what happens in general for people with Alzheimer's. But as we'll see, it doesn't have to always be that way. So that was kind of it. That's how things started. And I'm going to keep these episodes short so you can kind of listen to one and maybe do other things. But otherwise, just keep going with the next episode, and I'll pick up from the story here. So thanks for listening, and I'll see you soon.